Dear friends, as Topchubashov Center team, we are continuing our Post-Karabakh video interview series. The topic of our conversation today is Georgia. Its attitude towards the Karabakh conflict and post-conflict regional picture. Our guest is Dr. Mamuka Tsereteli, a US-based Georgian scholar. Dr. Tsereteli, thank you very much for accepting my invite and joining for our program. We've been conducting a series of video interviews dedicated to the Karabakh war, the post-war situation, and trying to cover various aspects and dimensions of the new regional geopolitical picture. It would be extremely interesting to learn how the war and the post-war situation also influences Georgia. Throughout the Karabakh conflict, Georgia remained neutral, although many in Azerbaijan did not fully understand this position due to several factors. Azerbaijani-Georgian joint projects, strategic partnership, similar problems within Georgia, and so on. What are the main arguments of the Georgian leadership, and did the society in Georgia generally support this stance?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for invitation, and it's a pleasure to be part of your program. I think you are asking a very important question, and I'll try to give you my explanation and how I think Georgian both government and general society approached this issue. There's no doubt that there is a close partnership and strategic collaboration between Georgia and Azerbaijan, and it's more than 2 decades now. And historically, obviously, closeness of two nations is exemplary. And but there are several factors I think we need to take into consideration. As you know, there are large communities of Armenian as Azerbaijani communities in Georgia. And by taking sides, I think that would instigate probably some internal escalation of internal clashes between these communities. And taking this process into Georgian territory could have created, obviously, internal destabilization of the country, which could have impacted not only internal dynamics, but also international dynamics. And as you know, Georgia's main problem is its relationship with its northern neighbor, Russia. Russia continues to occupy Georgian territories through separatist, using the separatist regions and separatist movements in 2 regions of Georgia. And internal escalation in Georgia could have triggered much larger Russian participation in the process, because no one could guarantee that this escalation on Georgian territory could not move into Armenian territory. And so Georgia had to be very careful in this process. I should probably also admit that definitely Georgia doesn't want to create bilateral problems with Armenia as well. Again, there is this historic, despite some issues and problems, there is historic closeness between 2 nations as well, and that needs to be also somehow maintained and for the stability and sake of stability of the region. Every country in this process, like Azerbaijan, acted based on its national interests. Georgia had to act in this process based on its national interests, and to maintain internal stability in this process was a major priority. Again, it affects obviously Georgia's relationship with Azerbaijan, Georgia's relationship with Armenia, but major worry was not to allow our northern neighbor Russia to have a pretext to get even larger participation or presence on military presence on Georgian territory. Because as you understand, taking this escalation to Armenian territory could have triggered Russia's greater participation.
What does the rise of Russia and Turkey as the main regional actors signify for Georgia? What advantages and challenges does Georgia find in the post-war regional configuration?
Oh, I think there are several factors here, and Georgia needs to adapt to these new realities. Again, I mentioned that every country acts based on its national interest. And in this situation, Georgia obviously needs to adjust a little bit try to adjust its strategic position vis-a-vis processes that happen. I think one important element is that increased Turkish participation in the regional affairs. As you know, Georgia has close partnership with Turkey as well, a strategic partnership with Turkey as well. Turkey is a major supporter of Georgia's NATO aspirations inside of NATO. Bilateral relationships are very, very close, and Georgia and Turkey is Georgia's #1 trade partner. So Georgia welcomes greater participation of Turkey in affairs of South Caucasus, as long as its balance is obviously, the major incentive is obviously to balance Russia's interests in the region. At the same time, I think as an outcome of the war, we see major Russian presence now, military presence in Karabakh. And this is not something that Georgia welcomes. And I think I may speculate here, but there is an interesting sort of process that took place before and during the war and after the war. I personally think that there was some kind of quiet acceptance in Russia of Azerbaijan military advancement. And so whether it was negotiated somehow or it was sort of quietly accepted as a post factum sort of development, the fact is that Russia did not intervene during the major military advancement of Azerbaijani army into occupied territories as well as in Karabakh. So inside of Karabakh. So I think as a result of what happened, now we have Russian troops on Azerbaijani territory legally. And the status of this obviously is peacekeeping operation. But there are some dangers there. And we had experience of Russian peacekeepers stationed in Georgian territories, and they always take sides, unfortunately. They're rarely neutral, and that creates some issues. So from Georgian perspective, having now Russian troops on Georgian territory in the Tskhinvali region and Abkhazia, having Russian troops in Gyumri military base, now having Russian troops inside of Karabakh and potentially controlling the transit corridor is not a good outcome. So it worries Georgia and worries, I think it should worry people who want to see a long-term stability in the region.
The transit corridor, a few seconds ago, well, the issue of restoring and opening of new transport lines in the region between Azerbaijan and Armenia has called into question Georgia's role, usually monopolistic role, as a transit country. Is there any concern in Georgia about a possible decrease of its role in its regional transport and energy projects?
Yes, there are two aspects to this question, I think. One aspect is that we are talking two types of cargoes, and transshipments and transit. With regard to energy resources, like natural gas and oil in particular, which is major export item for Azerbaijan and generating major income. These pipelines are crossing Georgian territory. I don't expect, frankly, that there will be any changes in that process to, let's say, move those pipelines now somehow to assume that Armenian-Azerbaijani relationship becomes so harmonious and so friendly that Azerbaijan decides to move those pipelines from Georgian territory to through other Armenian territory. So Georgia will continue to play a major role for transit of energy resources for Azerbaijan, which is critical and most important element of Azerbaijani export, as well as transit for Central Asian countries and others. So I think Georgia shouldn't worry about that, at least for foreseeable future between 5 to 10 years. With regard to general cargo, like containers, bulk cargo, some of the maybe oil products moving by rail and so forth, there may be some, obviously, redirection of cargoes going through Nakhichevan corridor. I think there are two beneficiaries of this process if this takes place. One is obviously for Azerbaijan internal economic and political development. It is essential to have direct line to Nakhichevan. It's very important. So Azerbaijan will be strategically better positioned if that corridor functions. And this is good for Azerbaijan. And second potential beneficiary may be Russia. If there is a trade, direct trade by rail between Russia through Azerbaijan, Armenia, Nakhichevan, Armenia, and then through Nakhichevan to Turkey. I think, or through Gumri to Turkey. I think, personally, I think that for Russia, it will be always priority to use for its cargo transit Iran rather than Turkey, and use ports like Bandar Abbas or Chabahar to trade with Asia, which is the major destination for trade for you thinking about Southern Corridor. There is obviously bilateral trade between Turkey and Russia, and that's where this corridor may be more attractive for Russia. But other than that bilateral trade, for Eastern Mediterranean or European trade, Russia will always use its own ports, Novorossiysk and other ports of Black Sea. So for European trade or Eastern Mediterranean trade, for Russia, it's priority to use its own ports. For Asian trade, priority will be Iranian north-south route. So in terms of whether Georgia should worry or not, I think overall, in general, if this process normalizes relationship between Armenia, Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and South Caucasus becomes less divided by this animosity and rivalry and acts like one region for economic as well as transit, trade, and ultimately, hopefully, political aspirations. I think that's more beneficial in the long range, it will be more beneficial for all the actors. If think for a moment if there are really some kind of harmonious relationship with all the actors involved, including Iran, Turkey, Russia, obviously 3 Caucasus states, then trade routes and trade flows will be moving in different directions. So Iran may send some of its cargoes through Georgian ports to Europe. Some of the European cargoes will be coming through Georgian ports to Iran, obviously to Azerbaijan, Turkey, and other places. So I think peace and stability is good for everybody. And if this project somehow contributes to the peaceful development in South Caucasus for all the participants, I think Georgia will find a ways to deal with this situation. It will lose some cargoes, but it will maybe gain some other, and there will be potential substitutes for those cargoes. Plus, obviously, Georgia needs to readjust to these new realities. Georgia has free and comprehensive trade agreement with the European Union, and which increased, by the way, Georgia's trade and export to European Union. But Georgia needs to make more effort to attract some of the production facilities on its territory to utilize this opportunity, including maybe with partnership with countries like Azerbaijan, obviously Turkey and others, who at this stage doesn't have that free trade access and non-tariff access to European market. So there are many ways, I think, to deal with this issue, but strategically, I think to make it shorter, So energy flow will stay on Georgian territory for foreseeable future. Other cargoes, there will be some reduction probably going through Georgia, but it could be substituted from other sources. And Georgia and Azerbaijan, by the way, need to work closely to increase trade to Europe from Central Asia via South Caucasus corridor, using Baku port and Georgian ports, sending cargoes to obviously Eastern Europe, Central Europe, those countries that are geographically closest to us.
Dr. Tsereteli, you touched upon Georgia's westward aspirations, Georgia's trade agreement with the European Union. But we all witnessed the absence of Western powers from the region. It was quite visible in Karabakh due to the disengagement of the West and the inability of the Minsk group, the official intermediary body, to provide a viable diplomatic solution. How is this absence perceived in Georgia, who has invested too much in Western support for her own development and security, as well as the resolution of two similar conflicts on her own territory?
I would say that, I think Georgia learned its lesson, lessons, maybe some, not all Georgians, but some Georgians learned their lessons about how much Georgia can rely on its security, and resolution of its own problems, on partnerships with other countries, Western countries in this case. I think Georgia has no other choice other than aspire to become members of these international institutions. There is a plan for Georgia to officially apply to EU membership in 2024. And NATO membership application is permanent from Georgia. Whether there will be changes in European, mostly European opinion about how to deal with Georgia's membership in this institution, it obviously depends on many different ingredients, and most importantly, it depends on position of Russia. And going forward, as we saw in recent months in Azerbaijan, geopolitical realities could change when small countries with support or acceptance of larger powers find a ways to achieve their national interests using different means. In that case, it was military operation. No, Georgia doesn't plan any military, obviously, engagement with these territories. And so peaceful somehow ways of resolution this conflict those conflicts are obviously optimism about that is limited, but at the same time, there's no alternative at this stage. So while there is not major optimism, there's no major optimism in joining these institutions in near future, for Georgian internal development, reforms that Georgia is conducting internally, harmonization of Georgia's regulatory environment and freedom of operation or things like that, still brings Georgia closer to European Union, or in general to more like economic freedom and freedom of movement and those elements. As you know, Georgia has now visa-free access to European Union, which allowed hundreds of thousands of Georgians to travel to Europe on a yearly basis. I mean, this is, we talk about Georgia being still pretty poor country, but if you look how many Georgians have traveled back and forth between Europe, I mean, this is incredible numbers, and they see how Europe lives and operates, and it brings different type of attitude to development of Georgia as a country by its own citizens. So I think there is a benefit of being oriented towards that direction and that goal for both internal development, but also international development. But I think Georgians, at least people who are in charge of thinking about longer term strategy, realized that Georgia needs to deal, first of all, we cannot artificially detach Georgia from this region and from its neighborhood, from its partner countries. So Georgia needs to be very close to its neighbors and to its partner countries, but at the same time move slowly to the direction that country wants to move, meaning to get integrated even more with those international institutions. Key question is who can provide security guarantees to Georgia? And at this stage, no country can or institution can provide security guarantees to Georgia. So Georgia needs to handle its own security and security guarantees by balancing different interests and different powers.
Thank you very much for this interesting and informative conversation, which I personally enjoyed a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.